So I'd like to introduce Stacy Denoy and Jenn Bradin, who both lost their husbands from COVID. Stacy, when did you lose your husband?
Anthony passed away April 19th of 2020.
And Jenn?
He passed away on April 20th of 2020.
So we just realized that they both lost their husbands a day apart. And Stacy, how old was Anthony?
He was 55.
Okay.
He actually would have been 55. He was 54 at the time.
Okay. And Jenn, how old was Yoni?
Yoni was 36.
36. And how old are your children, Jenn?
Noah just turned 3 on the 21st, and Bella will be 5 on the 30th.
And Stacy, how old are your children?
I have my son Joseph just turned 23, and my son Nicholas is turning 18 in 2 weeks.
Okay, so I really wanted to do this video to expose what people go through with COVID. And so Jenn, how has this last year been for you and your children?
It's been, everything was kind of turned upside down. I mean, you plan a life with someone, you picture a future, and we have 2 little babies that we plan to raise together, and it's just been an emotional roller coaster and somewhat of a nightmare.
Sure. And Stacy, does that sound like your story too?
Yes, and I would tell you that just looking in the difference in age of the children, we were now, my youngest son is heading off to college, and this was the time where we worked so hard to get to, it would be empty nest and it would be the 2 of us. And so, plans have changed. Again, it's the same story though. The end result is we planned a life together, and that wasn't somebody else's plan.
Right. And that happens with all of us with loss, because that was my story too, that I had a whole future planned at 42, and I had to plan a new future for myself and my kids. What is the most frustrating thing that you hear about COVID, Stacy? What is the most frustrating thing that you hear every day that people are saying?
Well, first of all, in the beginning, it was, wow, you're so young. And I said, well, it is affecting everybody. And I would think that opinion has changed, but it hasn't. People still say things like that, when it's affecting everybody. So that would be the first thing, that you're so young. That means he was so young. First of all, making an assumption. They had no idea about him, and they just they generalize. And that bothers me, that he's part of a generalization. He was a person, he was my everything, our everything. So that bothers me. But more recently, it's about the ignorant people who aren't knowledgeable about the vaccine, or they're quick to state their opinion about not getting the vaccine, or making comments such as, I know somebody that has COVID, we were all with this person, but don't tell anybody. I mean, I find them to be extremely insensitive and frustrating.
Oh yeah, don't tell anyone. That's terrible. Yeah. So that it could spread more. That's awful.
I'm still hearing that. I don't know about you, Jenn.
How about you, Jenn?
I think for me, I also got a lot of he was so young. Not that it was necessarily frustrating, but everyone asks me, did he have any underlying conditions, which I know is a big thing for a lot of people who've gotten sick and died from it. But he didn't. And there are a lot of people I know that were very sick and on ventilators and didn't have pre-existing condition, even when they were young. He did have walking pneumonia, which was just ironically happened a couple months before the COVID diagnosis, but prior to, he was completely healthy outside of that. So I think there's a misunderstanding about that. And I also get frustrated about the ignorance of people, or maybe people just being naive about the gathering. I even have friends who knowingly came into contact with people who were COVID positive, and still, before they got their own test results back, were going out and doing things because they just assumed that they were going to be negative, or it wasn't that big of a deal. And they're just like, oh, I'm going to do my thing until I know for sure. And it's just, listen, I work at Stony Brook Hospital. I've seen how this affects people from day one, and it can affect anyone at any time. So it's very scary, and I don't know how seriously everyone takes it.
That's really what is, it's really a shame that people aren't taking this serious and they think that it's political. Like they made it political when it's a matter of life and death.
Right.
Like the politics have nothing to do with, like they're not in your household knowing what's happening now with your family and how hard it is to go forward without your person, and it's not a political statement. It's a matter of life and death,
Right. I use the example of the polio vaccine. When the polio vaccine came out, nobody asked questions. They lined up in the streets to get that because it was life or death. If you didn't get it, you'd die. And yet this is so very different. And granted, the times are different, and we have a lot more news media outlets. We've got the internet. We've got a lot of false information going on and opinions. But the truth is that there was very little known about the polio vaccine, and people would give, their right arm to get it. Right. So, again, it's opinion, but when you're directly affected, and Jen, I would tell you, my husband had no underlying conditions either. And so it's very frustrating to hear, well, was there something wrong with him? What conditions did he have?
Right, right.
So again, it's all about, and they're still asking those questions with all of the knowledge we have today, which is very different than what we had 15 months ago.
Right. And we both were affected by it at a time where it was the very beginning. When we were both diagnosed with COVID, it was on March, Yoni got his test on March 12th, and I got mine on March 13th of 2020, which was literally, I think, the day or two before everything got shut down. So no one knew anything at that time. Now, there's still a lot that's unknown, but we have a lot more information at our fingertips, and not as people are still not listening.
Well, I if I may, Catherine, before, is just the last thing that just came up when you said that, that's extremely hurtful to me, is when people say, well, your husband was one of the first to get it, and they didn't know as much as they know now. So if he got it now, he'd probably be alive. Yeah. That's what I hear. And
what a thing to say to someone.
Yeah. And I think about that and I say, well, I'm not sure. Am I supposed to be angry about that? Am I supposed, and does that really change? And how do you know that? That is quite the statement.
Yeah. You don't know. I still think that there's so much unknown about it, and how when it gets to a certain point in your body, how they can slow it down or even stop it. That, that's another naive statement that I think that people make, and they just don't understand.
I always say people have a thought and then they act on it without thinking it through. I mean, we get a lot of people from lung cancer, and I would never ask someone who lost someone from lung cancer if they smoked. And it's funny when I register them and I say, and what did they pass from? They'll say lung cancer, and she never smoked, or he never smoked. But I don't ask that, because to me, that's like an intrusive question to ask someone what's the difference? They're not here. What's the difference? Why do we have to know if they did that or not? Are we worried about our own mortality? Is that why they're asking? Did he have underlying conditions? Because I don't. So that means I won't get it. I'm not sure where those questions are coming from, but they're intrusive and insulting to people who have had a loss.
I think you're right, though. I think it's people's own fear of their own mortality. And that's why they ask you those questions, for you to make them feel better. And and which again makes me frustrated and a bit angry, because you're saying you're sorry for my loss, followed up by make me feel better. Answer these questions for me to make me feel better. And there are times where I'm tired of making other people feel better about my loss.
Yeah, and it took me a long time to get to that point too. But now, at the beginning, when people would ask, how are you doing? I was like, oh, we're doing okay. Like, we have a lot of help. And now I'm just like, I don't have to go into details, but I just say, I'm taking it one day at a time and doing the best that I can, because
and that's all you can do.
Yeah. You know,
Um,
because what else can you do?
Right. That's all you can do is take it one day at a time. And, you know, with loss before you guys came into our groups, we've had frustration with grief and the questions and the ignorance when it comes to grief. And now with COVID, I see so much more. We have over 150 widows from COVID. And ironically, we only have 2 men. And I don't know if it's because most men don't like to come into support groups because they have to actually maybe discuss what they're going through and they'd rather avoid it because it's too emotional for them and they don't want to have feelings. But I do feel that even if they do that at some point, how long can you hold it down? At some point it comes out, you know, and we can't really run from grief. We have to deal with it. The avoidance makes it even more difficult when we're going through this.
So Catherine, I think that there's a couple of things. I think, first of all, thank you, because when I reached out to you in the beginning, you didn't know much about COVID. You told me that. I was one of the first people that joined that had a loss to COVID, but yet you accepted me with open arms and matched me with an incredible group of people. You know, I just recently lost my mom in June, and my stepdad is struggling. Thank you. And she was my rock through this loss. And so it's been definitely interesting, but back to the groups, if it wasn't for this group, I wouldn't be able to articulate the stages to my, you know, and to really be present if it wasn't for the other people in this group. It's really been quite amazing that, you know, just the transformation. And when I reached out to you, I thought it was more one-on-one. I didn't realize it was a group setting. And so I was a bit apprehensive. And I would say I was even a bit standoffish the first 1 or 2 meetings. This isn't for me. These people know nothing about me. We don't have anything in common. They don't have the job I have. They don't have the life I have. They don't know anything about me. And I remember calling my best friend and she said, you committed to 8 weeks. Do it. Just do it. You're not a quitter. Just do it. And then a comment was made during one of the meetings that, and I don't remember the exact words, but it had to do with your existing friends versus the new friends that you'd meet in the group. And I took, I would say, a bit of umbrage or offense to the comment that my friends would not be my friends. I misunderstood the statement. Let's just put it that way. And I'm finding now that it's not that they don't want to be your friend. It's that they don't understand what you're going through and you feel more misplaced than yeah. And it's taken me a long time to reflect on those comments and how I reacted to them and to how I really feel now, because it's not that people don't call or that I have a big wide group, but it's your choice who you want to spend your time with now. And I would rather spend my time with people that understand where I'm at and don't make me uncomfortable.
Right. I always felt that when I was with my married friends, although they were very supportive, I didn't want to be the third wheel. In fact, I felt more alone when I was with a couple than I did when I was with someone who was like myself, a widow. Mm-hmm. I felt more alone with couples, you know, so that made me gravitate to the widowed people because I didn't want to have that feeling. It just didn't make me feel comfortable in my own skin. I'm like, where do I fit in here? This is an old life that I don't know how to be in anymore, you know, and I'm glad that the group helped you. And Jen was in my group.
Yeah. So, yeah, I was lucky enough to be in Catherine's group. I started, I think it was the first group I did was 3 weeks after Yoni passed. And my mom was the one that actually reached out to Catherine originally, because I think I was just so lost at the time that I just didn't even know what to do with myself. And I work in this field, like I work in psychiatry and mental health, and, you know, it's just a very good example of how you're great at helping other people, but when it comes to your own life, just it's really hard to pull it together. And in a moment where I felt completely lost and alone, even with so many people around me, I felt at I had a home once a week with this group of people. Some of them were from all over the world at the time. But we were all brought together in these groups. And even though there were skills that I was learning that I knew about, just hearing them in those moments when I was so lost, reminding me of what I needed to do and pushing me to try and do them was something that was invaluable and that I really needed. And, the first time it was very hard. I felt like, I really didn't want to be a part of this club. I didn't want to be a part of a widow club. I still sometimes struggle with it, but especially then.
Nobody wants to be a widow.
Yeah.
It's a club nobody wants to be in, but I always love when the members say to me, I'm lucky in my unluckiness that I found the group and I found people who get me and understand what I'm going through.
And I think that especially at that time, at 3 weeks, even though I was surrounded by so many people who were so sad over Yoni's loss and just the gaping hole that was left in all of our lives because of it, the only people who really understood what I was feeling in those moments were the people in that group, because they all had just experienced the same thing within maybe a few weeks to a month of myself. So thank you for that. And also, I participated in another group the next season for 8 weeks again, when I was a little more clear-minded and able to kind of internalize things a little bit more that we were learning in the groups. But even after that, anytime I've reached out to you, Catherine, like, you respond to me almost immediately, which I have no idea how you have the time to do that.
You always say that to me, such a quick response.
This
is what I'm good at. This is my talent, is grief. This is what I do. This is what I work at, to help people get through this. This is what my purpose and my mission is,
So thank you so much, because you've really been there for me, even after months of not talking. And we had a coaching session one time for over an hour where you just listened and you understood it in a way that no one else can really understand it, because you've lived it and you've also witnessed a lot of people go through it from the very beginning. And now, what is it, 15 years you've been doing this?
15 years, yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, listen, you may not have gone to school to be a therapist or a social worker, but your experience gives you way more qualifications than anyone else,
Thank you, Jen. Thank you for saying that. I appreciate it. And I appreciate your time today. So now I'm going to just ask you, is there anything else that you would like people to know about COVID before we end this session? I'll start with you, Jen. Is there anything else that you would like people to know?
I want people to make sure that they're taking this as seriously as possible. I think, the vaccines are, just from a hospital perspective, what's saving people's lives right now. But I also understand that people have health reasons and personal choices and reasons why they may not want to do it. But I think that you need to really weigh those versus saving your life and saving the lives of your family, and to be respectful of one another, because there's just so much chaos and anger and animosity amongst people about these vaccines. And really, they're being put out there to help people and save their lives and keep this from happening to other families.
I agree with that. How about you, Stacy? What would you like people to know?
I would echo exactly what Jen said, and I'm not in the health profession, but I'm fortunate to work for a company that puts their associates' health first. And so when I say that, because people are feeling cooped up and locked up and want to get back to what they call normal. We'll never have, we that have lost to COVID, or we don't know what normal is. So there's no rush for us. But what I would ask people is to, one, take this seriously, and two, realize that you have the ability to have a choice to have normal again. Just don't rush to have that normal right now. We have no choice but to create a new normal. And that again is a choice. I at last in the holiday season, I remember putting something publicly out that I stated, this year is a choice for most people, to get together, have a gathering, so on and so forth. We don't have the choice anymore. And so I'd like people to make a conscious choice to take this very seriously. It's real. We're real people.
Right. And you don't. You don't want to put yourself in a position where you have to create a new normal like we did, because at the time we absolutely didn't have any choice or knowledge or anything. And now there's so much more knowledge and information and tools that people like the vaccines can utilize to hopefully avoid winding up in the same situation we're in.
Agree. Agree. And I just, I just want to say that I'm still getting widows as of a month ago who lost someone. She lost 2 people actually from COVID in her household. So it's still happening. Sometimes there's people who are on the fence about getting the vaccine, and they, one person gets COVID and then they get their vaccine. And it's like, don't wait till it's too late. And like, I got my vaccine back in April, thanks to one of the group members who was a nurse who called me and got me in. And I still wear my mask wherever I go. Even when I gather, I keep my mask on. And people are like, what are you afraid of? And I'm like, I'm not afraid. But I know even when you're vaccinated, you could become a carrier and you could pass it on to someone else. And I care enough about everyone I'm with to want to keep my mask on, not just for me, but for them too. So I just want to end it with that. And I want to thank the both of you so much for taking the time and being with us today at Widowed Not Alone.
Thank you very much for us, Catherine.